I've been working as a product manager in tech for 10 years now. In today's video, I want to just recap and talk you guys through what it was like and how I got my first job as a product manager in tech. Eventually went on to become a leader at tech companies in Silicon Valley as well as startups. I've worked across the spectrum of tech companies and spoken to hundreds of aspiring product managers. So I want to give you guys some of my lessons that may help you to land your first product management role at a top tech company. Hey, if you're new here on this channel, we talk about ways to level up your product management skills and career. So consider subscribing if you want more content like this. So starting way back in school, I wasn't the most focused student. I didn't have the top grades. I was in the top, 10% of students, but I was very curious. I was always looking at ways to explore new ideas, explore new ways of thinking, exploring new subjects, things like that. And so then when I went to college, again, I didn't have a clear idea of exactly what I wanted to do. I was broadly good in science and had a ambition of getting into engineering, but wasn't exactly sure what type of engineering or why I wanted to do engineering. And so the beauty of going to college in the US was that I could really figure out and use my time there to explore different ideas and different subjects. So I initially started off focusing on physics and math, moving to mechanical engineering, eventually landing on industrial engineering, which to me served as a mix of heavy engineering and science, as well as business and entrepreneurship kinds of subjects. And so it was a good amalgamation and mix of a few different ideas and views of the world that I had. It also gave me a way to explore multiple things that I was interested in on the sidelines. I still remember when I bought my first iPad in 2010 and I was zooming in and doing my astronomy homework using an astronomy app. And when I showed that to my classmates, everyone was amazed, like, wow, that's a really cool piece of tech and software that's helping you learn and apply your knowledge, or figure out some of the questions in your mind. And that was my first, I think, real taste of how tech and software could be used to level up, and basically the whole bicycle for a mind story that Steve Jobs has famously talked about. So that was really my first taste of that whole concept. Now, after graduating from college, I had a very important dilemma and choice to be made. On the one hand, I had gotten into a top strategy consulting firm, and that was a way for me to get into the world of business operations, career, and to explore what are the different industries out there, what are the different roles, how are there different ways that value can be added. And so it was a great way for me to think about exploring the space of business without having to pick a specific path. On the other hand, I spoke to someone who was leading a new telecom company under the Reliance brand of companies in India. And the story that they told me about the compelling vision that Reliance had in the telecom space, and this was at the cusp of 4G being launched and introduced in India, was very fascinating and a very interesting way for me to explore the infrastructure side of technology, and something that eventually would end up powering a lot of the growth that has come into the tech space and the software space in India in the past few years. So this was a very crucial path for me, or a crucial decision for me to make between these two things. I still remember a story someone told me was, in order to learn how to swim, you don't want to be reading a book, studying other people who are swimming and making reports based on that. You don't want to be watching videos about swimming, etc. You want to just jump into the water and swim for yourself. Now, when you first start swimming, you might not know exactly what you're doing. You might have to flail around, you might have to sort of figure it out as you go, and that's okay, but that is the best way to learn how to swim. Not to study swimming from the sidelines or from a sort of theoretical point of view, but actually to dive in and do it from a practical point of view. And all of that story is to say that this person was really advocating for me to get into an operating role, to get into industry, play a part, play a role, and get into a specific industry and a specific vertical, solve a problem end to end, and then think about how to generalize that across industries. And all of that convinced me to join Reliance in their telecom business, and give up the nice consulting gig that I had lined up. And so I joined in the CEO's office, and for the first few months, he gave me a few different projects for me to think about and work on across the company. And these were things that were being thought of, but they needed essentially someone to come in and put together all the thoughts across the organization. So one of the projects, for example, that I worked on was what would the business plan look like for this kind of a telecom business, and did it make sense to do more of a big bang all India launch of the product and services, or did it make sense to do a phase wise launch, spread out our capex, spread out our revenues, and do more of a gradual burn. And so we built models that compared both of them, and came up with some recommendations, came up with some ideas. But the process of making the model itself made me learn so much about how the telecom market and how generally the Indian market works. Eventually, what ended up happening was that the head of customer service joined the company, and she was looking for a few product managers to get started and start building some products from a customer centric viewpoint. And so I put my hand up and became one of the first couple of PMs at Reliance Jio, and that was something that was very fascinating for me. So the first lesson here for everyone is that don't think about the specific job that you want to get. First, build the experience and build the mindset around the domain, around the industry. Bring something to the table which gives you that lens that you can think about things from. Product management is just the role, but you have to come in with knowledge of how does the customer think about things, what are the problems that exist in this market, what are the other dynamics in this space, and all of those things around the product management role and all the skills that you learn outside of the core product management skill set is what will help you actually add value as a product manager. So I became one of the first batch of PMs at Jio and had to now figure out what does product management actually mean and what does it mean to be a product manager. The first step that I took was to dive into user flows and customer journeys, really just mapping out, hey, from the time that a customer wants to place an order, either they walk into the store or they call our call center or they go to our website, what is the next step and what is the flow of the customer and the services until they get everything activated. In India, since telecom is a regulated market, again, there's a lot of paperwork and regulatory oversight that goes into the activation of a internet connection. And so we had to factor in all of these things. It took us months of effort and whiteboards and multiple charts printed out and visualizing everything in a massive room to get to the core of how we wanted to solve this problem. The clear vision that we set for ourselves was that we wanted to reduce the time that it takes to activate a connection at that point, which was about a half a day to a full day. We wanted the customer to be able to walk into the store, fill in the form, and then browse some products around there and walk out with an activated connection. So that's something that we were able to achieve because we dove into the customer journeys, we dove into mapping every variation across stores that we owned, partner stores, small cities, big cities, etc., etc. and figuring out what the exact model would be for us to deliver this customer experience. That required us to figure out not just the software and tech side of things, but also the real world operations side of things. So that's another lesson for anyone who wants to be a PM. Don't just think of the software, but think about how that software is actually going to be used in the real world. One of the big challenges that we had was that a lot of the software that we had built had to run on very basic smartphones that maybe didn't have enough RAM, they didn't have enough memory, they didn't have a stable internet connections. And so we had to factor in all of those parameters when we built a piece of software that was going to be used by hundreds of thousands of stores and agents across the country. And so, very quickly, I had to dive into understanding not just the industry but also the technical aspects of the role. So, I had to sit with the fiber team, for example, to understand exactly how a fiber network is laid out. What does it mean when there is a light path signal that's going from one end to the other in a fiber cable? What happens when there's a cut? Is there redundancy? How is the fiber laid out through a city in a circular or chain mechanism? What are different aggregation points? Things like that. And so, all of that to say is another lesson for anyone getting into product management is make sure to dive into the details. Coming in with a fresh set of eyes and coming in young, coming in with a lot of energy enables you to come in with that very, very deep mindset where you're trying to go really deep. Your manager might not have the time to go as deep into things because they have to worry about a lot of things. They have a bunch of people reporting to them, they have to make reports, presentations, etc. So they are relying on you to go really deep and be the expert and answer any question that they may have from a technical standpoint around how the product actually works and how the service will actually be delivered to your customers. I was fortunate enough to find an organization that empowered me and gave me the opportunity to become a product manager and build up these skills. But it's really important for everyone to find that opportunity and find that journey for themselves. But in addition to all of this, don't forget that I had my own set of failures and mistakes. For example, I had no idea how to collaborate with engineering. I was working with them and sketching things out, and then I would just hand it over to them and then not check in. I wouldn't set specific deadlines or checkpoints. I didn't know how to phase out the software and phase out the product. I was only thinking of the end state, which was a too much of an idealistic situation. So I had to figure out, how do I actually collaborate with engineering? How do I break down my vision into actionable and executable chunks and then keep testing as we go on? So I had to figure out how to run trial projects and trial launches where we launched to a market of 5,000 homes to start with, get all of them activated, see the processes actually in place and in action, see all the stuff that broke and didn't work, and then go back to the drawing board, fix all of those things, and repeat that cycle. So I had to go through this cycle of iteration, whereas initially I was just thinking of this 0 to 1 journey as this big, big master plan that I would just sit down and sketch everything out, and then the team would just execute against that, and we would go ahead in basically a very waterfall kind of flow. But how do you go move from a waterfall model to more of an agile model is something that I had to learn in my first job. Something else I had to get really good about is collaboration and communication of my vision. So I had started to form a vision of how I wanted some of these products and processes to work, but it was yet another challenge to be able to communicate that out to the rest of the teams. And that's another very important lesson for everyone to understand is that the value of your work is only shown and understood by others if you are able to communicate and present those ideas in a meaningful way to everyone. So I had to get really good at making presentations, speaking to people, collaborating with people, having one-on-ones, group meetings, how to actually speak up in meetings when there are people with 10, 15, 20 years of experience around me and I am fresh out of college. How do I speak up, have a point of view, and set my vision in front of the rest of the team so that they can understand where I'm coming from and what value I am adding to the team? So get really good at some of these soft skills: communication, presentations, collaboration, making things understandable from a point of view of someone who doesn't come in with a lot of context, front loading the story to tell exactly what you've learned rather than going through the entire journey. So that's the quick story of how I got my first break as a PM. Three things that I will end with. One, I think the best way to break into product management is to actually make a lateral move. So first get familiar with an organization, its customers, its market in a product management related role, and then ask your product management leader for you to be given an opportunity to make the switch into product management. Once you already understand the team, you already have familiarity with the customers, the pain points, and a bunch of other aspects of the product management role. That's number one. Number two, really build and work on your communication, collaboration, and presentation skills. I'll link in the description a couple of videos I've made about storytelling and how to make killer presentations. So that's really key. And number three, make sure that your resume and your value proposition is very clear. I have an entire product on Gumroad that you can check out. It's really cheap for you to craft a killer resume and make that a meaningful tool to break into product management. That's going to be really key because it's only if you're able to represent yourself really well in your resume will you be given a chance and given that opportunity, because people will see that, hey, this person has the skills necessary in order to become a PM. So that's the parting advice that I have for everyone. Check out all the links in the description. Hope you like this video. It's a little bit different from my normal style of making videos. See you guys in the next one.